Picture a man standing on a brightly lit stage, back in the 1950s. He's singing this incredibly catchy, upbeat song about bananas.
Right. Everybody knows the one.
Exactly. The crowd is swaying, they're smiling, just completely charmed. I mean, the whole world knows him for this one massive, undeniable hit. But now, I want you to take that exact same man and fast forward to the Freedom Summer of 1964.
Oh, wow. Yeah, quite a shift.
It really is, because now he is secretly flying into Mississippi under the cover of night alongside Sidney Poitier, and he is carrying $60,000 in cold, hard cash to illegally bankroll the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee.
Yeah, just wild.
Right. Take that same pop star and watch him bail Martin Luther King Jr. out of a Birmingham jail. Watch him buy an entire 21-room apartment building in New York City using dummy corporations just to totally dismantle a racist landlord's housing policy.
The contrast there is just stunning.
Yeah.
And the thing is, the man in the brightly colored shirt singing Calypso and the, underground financier of the American Civil Rights Movement were, in fact, the exact same person.
They were. And that is the mission of our deep dive today into the source material we have on Harry Belafonte. This is, it's a story-driven biography of a man who just masterfully married pop culture and radical politics.
He really did. Belafonte's life operates as a masterclass in how to leverage personal success and fame to fight systemic injustice. I mean, if you've ever wondered how to use your own platform, your own wealth, or your influence for a greater good, his blueprint is just unparalleled.
Yeah.
He didn't just, lend his name to a cause. He engineered its actual physical survival.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand the architecture of that platform, we really have to look at the severe disadvantages he started with.
Right, he did not start at the top.
Not at all. The sources tell us he was born Harold George Belafonte Jr. in Harlem in 1927. His father was a chef, his mother was a housekeeper, and they both had Caribbean roots. And he actually spent a pretty large chunk of his childhood from 1932 to 1940 living with his grandmother in Jamaica before coming back to New York.
And that return to New York hit him with a brutal reality check. He attended George Washington High School, but academics were just an insurmountable wall for him.
Because of the dyslexia.
Right, exactly. He was struggling with undiagnosed dyslexia, and he was blind in one eye. So when you can't read the board, and the words on the page are literally scrambling themselves, the educational system of the 1940s simply leaves you behind.
Wow. Yeah, they didn't have the support systems back then.
Not at all. He ended up dropping out.
So you have a teenager with no diploma, facing a system that just isn't built for him, looking for literally any way out. He joins the U.S. Navy and serves during World War II. But the real turning point, like the accidental spark, happens after the war.
When he's a janitor, right.
Yeah, he's just trying to survive working as a janitor's assistant. And a tenant in the building gives him a tip for his work, but it's not cash. It's 2 tickets to see a production at the American Negro Theater.
Which totally changes his life. He walks into that theater, watches the performance, and is entirely captivated. I mean, the art form just gets under his skin.
Yeah.
And he decides, against all odds, that he is going to be a dramatic stage actor. And while he's hanging around the theater scene, totally dead broke, he meets another aspiring actor in the exact same financial situation, Sidney Poitier.
And this leads to one of the most, I think, brilliant workarounds in the source material. So Belafonte and Poitier want to study the great actors of their day, but they obviously can't afford local theater tickets. So their solution is to pool whatever pennies they have to buy a single ticket.
Just one ticket for the two of them.
Just one. One of them goes inside, watches the first act of the play, meticulously memorizes the blocking and the emotional beats, and then comes out to the lobby during intermission.
And they swap.
Yes. They trade the ticket stub, and the first guy gives the second guy a full dramatic recap of everything that just happened so he can go in and watch the second act with full context.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Highlights this ravenous hunger for the craft. They weren't just passively consuming entertainment. They were studying it like an engineering manual, breaking down how a performance works so they could replicate it.
It's basically the 1940s equivalent of a password sharing scheme for a streaming service.
Oh, totally.
They hacked the barrier to entry, and that hunger pushes Belafonte to enroll in acting classes at the dramatic workshop of the New School. Suddenly, he's in a room with Marlon Brando, Tony Curtis, Walter Matthau, B. Arthur, and of course, Poitier.
That is an insane lineup of classmates.
Right, but the school requires tuition, so to pay for the dramatic acting classes, Belafonte needs a revenue stream. So he just starts singing in New York clubs.
And the irony here is that his side hustle immediately outclassed his main ambition. The very first time he appeared in front of an audience as a singer, his backing band was the Charlie Parker Band.
Wait, really? Like Charlie Parker on sax?
Yes, Charlie Parker on sax, Max Roach on drums, and Miles Davis on trumpet. He was surrounded by absolute titans of jazz, which, forced him to elevate his own stage presence instantly.
Talk about pressure. But that stage presence translates directly into his 1956 album, Calypso, and I really don't think we can overstate the sheer seismic impact of this record.
It was huge.
It became the first LP long-playing record in global history to sell more than 1 million copies in a single year. I mean, it spent 31 weeks at #1 on the Billboard charts.
And it featured his signature track, Deo, the Banana Boat song, which introduced American pop audiences to a genre that's rooted in Trinidad and Tobago. The media immediately crowned him the king of Calypso. But, well, Belafonte wore that title with deep discomfort.
Yeah, I want to dig into that discomfort for a second.
Yeah.
He's making unprecedented money. He's a global superstar. Why reject the crown the media is literally handing him?
Because he understood the cultural context that the American media was completely ignoring. In the Caribbean, the title of Calypso Monarch is a formal, fiercely contested honor.
Oh, it's an actual title.
Exactly. It's awarded through these grueling competitions based on extemporaneous lyrical battling and deep, authentic local roots. Belafonte was born in Harlem. He viewed himself as an interpreter and a popularizer of the music, not its monarch.
Right, that makes sense.
He felt like an interloper, accepting a title he just hadn't earned through the traditional cultural gauntlet.
So he's hyper-aware of authenticity. That explains why he starts pushing back against Hollywood's machinery. Like, he's offered the lead role of Porgy in Otto Preminger's massive film adaptation of Porgy and Bess. This is a guaranteed blockbuster starring opposite Dorothy Dandridge, and he turns it down cold.
He read the script and objected to the racial stereotyping. He just refused to perform a role he felt demeaned black life, even if it cost him a fortune. Interestingly enough, his buddy, Sidney Poitier, ended up taking the role.
Really?
Yeah, but Belafonte was drawing a hard boundary.
I'm curious, though. We're talking about the 1950s here. This is the McCarthy era, the Red Scare. The government is actively destroying the careers of artists deemed subversive or, too radical. How does black men in the 1950s turn down major studio roles and associate with known radicals like Paul Robeson without getting completely blacklisted and ruined?
One word, capitalism. His commercial success was simply too massive. The McCarthy-era blacklist destroyed thousands of careers, but the entertainment industry operates on a fundamental formula of profit. Belafonte was the first artist to sell 1 million LPs.
They couldn't afford to lose him.
Exactly. Record labels, promoters, television networks, they couldn't afford to blacklist him because cutting him out meant losing millions of dollars. His unprecedented wealth and fame created an armor that made him virtually untouchable.
And once he realizes he's wearing that armor, he doesn't just protect himself. He weaponizes it. The sources detail how he basically became the secret logistical engine of the civil rights movement.
What's fascinating here is that we often romanticize historical movements as these spontaneous uprisings of pure willpower. But willpower doesn't pay for bus tickets.
No, it doesn't.
Movements require bail money, travel funds, secure communication lines, safe houses. Belafonte, who was mentored heavily by the radical actor and activist Paul Robeson, stepped in to provide that critical infrastructure. He became a very close confidant of Martin Luther King Jr.
Which was a very practical necessity because MLK only made $8,000 a year as a preacher.
Right.
Even adjusted for inflation, that's just not enough to support a family while organizing a national revolution. Belafonte personally provided for King's family, freeing King from that financial terror so he could focus entirely on the movement.
And when King and other protesters were thrown into the Birmingham jail in 1963, the local movement was financially tapped out. It was Belafonte who immediately raised and wired the $50,000 required to bail them out.
But writing a check from a safe distance is one thing. The Freedom Summer of 1964 is a whole different level of commitment.
Oh, absolutely.
The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, is in Mississippi registering voters. Activists are literally being murdered. The organization is completely broke and desperate. And Belafonte doesn't just use a bank transfer for this one.
Because bank transfers could be intercepted or frozen by hostile local authorities, the activists needed untraceable cash to survive. So Belafonte and Poitier pack a bag with $60,000 in physical cash.
Just in a bag.
In a bag. They charter a flight and land in Greenwood, Mississippi at night. and they are immediately chased by armed members of the Ku Klux Klan and local police.
That is terrifying.
They literally have to speed through the darkness to a safe house, risking their own lives just to physically hand over the cash that kept SNCC operational.
That is straight up action movie level logistics, entirely driven by a pop star. And that same instinct to outmaneuver a hostile system shows up in his personal life, too, specifically with that real estate story from 1958.
Oh, I love this story.
So Belafonte wants to rent an apartment at 300 West End Avenue in Manhattan. The landlord refuses him purely because he is black.
And most people with his resources would, file a civil rights lawsuit or orchestrate a public boycott. But Belafonte chose a much more surgical retaliation. He hired legal representation to set up 3 dummy real estate corporations.
And if you're wondering how that works, a dummy corporation is just an entity created to hide the identity of the true buyer. So the lawyer registers a generic-sounding LLC. That LLC approaches the racist landlord with a cash offer for the entire building.
The landlord just sees corporate paperwork and dollar signs, so he signs the deed over?
Yep. And the moment the ink was dry, Belafonte dissolved the corporate veil and revealed himself as the sole owner of the entire 21-room building.
It's so good.
He didn't just force his way into an apartment. He bought the system that tried to exclude him. He turned the building into a co-op and invited his friends, both black and white, to live there. And he ended up living in that apartment for 48 years.
It's just an incredible power move.
Yeah.
And as his influence grew, he started applying that same tactical leverage to the highest levels of American politics. I mean, look at the 1960 presidential election between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon.
Yeah, that was a tense one.
The Kennedy campaign was in an absolute panic because Jackie Robinson, arguably the most iconic black athlete in America, had endorsed Nixon. Robinson felt Kennedy was completely disingenuous on civil rights.
Right.
So Kennedy desperately needed a counterweight to win the black vote, and he looked to Belafonte, who had just become the first black person to win an Emmy.
So Kennedy invites Belafonte to his apartment, fully expecting to deploy his famous charm and secure an endorsement. But Belafonte walks in, sits down, and essentially tells the future president, I agree with Jackie Robinson.
Wow.
He refuses to mobilize black entertainers for Kennedy unless Kennedy agrees to a direct meeting with Martin Luther King Jr.
And Kennedy was highly hesitant to associate with King, fearing it would alienate Southern white voters. But Belafonte held the leverage. He forced the establishment to confront the movement directly. He brokered the connection that eventually helped shift the black vote to the Democratic ticket.
And he acted as a power broker again in 1963, during the infamous Baldwin-Kennedy meeting. The author James Baldwin invites Belafonte and a group of civil rights figures to meet with Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy at RFK's apartment.
And the tension in that room escalated rapidly when the topic shifted to the Vietnam War. RFK suggested that black men should be proud to serve their country.
Oof.
Yeah. And a young civil rights advocate named Jerome Smith, who had been brutally beaten by mobs while protesting in the South, was sitting there. Smith exploded. He scolded the Attorney General, stating his utter refusal to fight for a country that refused to protect his basic human rights. Kennedy was visibly shocked and deeply offended by the disrespect.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because you might expect the polished celebrity to play the diplomat, right? To smooth things over. But Belafonte refuses. It's like a translator refusing to soften the harsh words of a foreign diplomat. He looks at Kennedy and defends Smith's anger. He tells the Attorney General that he needed to be in the presence of a man like Smith to understand a profound frustration with American patriotism that white leaders were completely blind to. He just refused to sanitize the anger of Black America for white comfort.
And that refusal to sanitize extended straight into his television career, too, often triggering absolute corporate panic. In 1968, he appeared on a primetime NBC special hosted by the British pop star Petula Clark. They were singing a duet, and in a completely natural moment, Clark simply smiled and placed her hand on Belafonte's arm.
Just a hand on the arm.
Just a hand on the arm. And that physical touch caused an absolute meltdown. Doyle Lott, the advertising manager for the show's sponsor, Plymouth Motors, halted the production. He was terrified of the racial taboos of a white woman touching a black man on national television. He demanded they retape the performance from a different angle to hide the touch.
But Clark, who owned the rights to the special, drew a line in the sand. She told NBC and the sponsor that the show would air exactly as taped or it wouldn't air at all.
Good for her.
Yeah. The sponsor eventually caved, Lott was relieved of his duties, and the special aired to massive ratings. But the incident reveals the crazy tightrope Belafonte was walking. He is America's most beloved entertainer, yet the cultural infrastructure considers him so dangerous that a hand on his arm threatens a national boycott.
It's wild to think about.
And later that same year, CBS flat out censored his performance on the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour. He had taped a vibrant, Calypso-style Mardi Gras musical number, but he intercut the joyous singing with violent, brutal news footage of the police beating protesters at the 1968 Democratic National Convention.
CBS deleted the entire segment before it aired. They recognized exactly what he was doing. He was smuggling radical political critique into America's living rooms under the guise of late entertainment. And as Belafonte aged, his strategy shifted. He stopped smuggling the critique and started delivering it head-on.
We really see this transition into his later years, where he embraces the role of the unapologetic radical. Now, he never stopped his massive humanitarian efforts. I mean, he was instrumental in organizing the 1985 charity single, We Are the World, to fund African famine relief.
Right, a massive undertaking.
But his foreign policy stances began to deeply alienate the American establishment.
Yeah, in 1999, he traveled to Cuba. He met with the underground hip-hop community, assessing their struggles, and then secured a direct meeting with Fidel Castro. Belafonte managed to convince the Cuban government to stop suppressing rap music as a subversive Western influence and instead officially fund a special division for Cuban hip-hop within the Ministry of Culture.
That's a huge shift in cultural policy. Now, looking at the sources regarding his politics in the 21st century, it's clear he became a highly polarizing figure, and we need to be clear here for the listeners, we're just reporting these statements impartially to understand his trajectory based on the source material.
Yes, absolutely.
But they sparked massive national outrage. He became a fierce, relentless critic of U.S. foreign policy, specifically targeting the George W. Bush administration over the Iraq War.
In a 2002 radio interview, he drew a direct analogy to slavery. He compared Secretary of State Colin Powell and National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice to house slaves, implying that they were granted privilege only as long as they served the master, acting as puppets for the Bush administration's war efforts.
And the backlash was immediate. Powell called the remarks unfortunate, and Rice stated publicly that she didn't need Harry Belafonte to explain what it meant to be black. But Belafonte doubled down. During a meeting with Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez, he referred to George W. Bush as the greatest terrorist in the world, citing the civilian death toll of the Iraq War as his justification.
And his critiques weren't limited to Republicans either. The sources note he expressed deep frustration with the Obama administration in 2012 over political gridlock, suggesting to Al Sharpton that Obama needed to, quote, work like a third world dictator and just put all of these guys in jail. And by 2016, he endorsed Senator Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primaries, citing Sanders as representing a moral imperative.
When you look at the totality of these statements, you see a man who has completely discarded the filter he had to use back in the 1950s. When critics attacked his later rhetoric, his response was basically, bring it on, dissent is central to any democracy.
This raises an important question about how he viewed his own legacy. During a speech at Duke University in 2006, amidst the heaviest waves of backlash, he addressed the crowd and said that if he could choose his own epitaph, he would read, Harry Belafonte, Patriot.
Wow.
He did not view his inflammatory statements as a betrayal of his country or destruction of his brand. He viewed his dissent as the ultimate necessary exercise of his freedom.
So what does this all mean for us? Harold George Belafonte Jr. passed away in April 2023 at the age of 96. He went from a dyslexic kid sharing a single theater ticket in New York to becoming an EGOT winner, one of the incredibly rare performers to win an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony.
An absolute legend.
And he used the capital from those awards to physically bankroll the greatest social movement in American history.
It really leaves you with a thought experiment for the modern era. Think about the massive celebrities of today. If a modern superstar took the extreme physical and financial risks Belafonte took in the 1960s, flying bags of cash into violently hostile territory, or if they made the kind of incendiary, polarizing statements he made in his 70s and 80s, would their careers survive the blowback?
It's a great question. Could a modern pop icon sustain that level of radical friction, or are they too trapped by the very corporate machinery Belafonte managed to hack? It really makes you wonder if Harry Belafonte was just a wholly unique phenomenon, a man who figured out how to use a catchy song about bananas to literally buy the system and change the world.